Glory to Ukraine. I'm Natalia Starobravo. We are at the Mediacentru Ukraine. This is the 100th day of the full-scale war of Russia against Ukraine. With us, we have Serhii Horbachov, the Education Ombudsman of Ukraine. Greetings. Let's start with a question about the schooling of the children in the occupied territories and the conditions for their education. If they are studying, it is a major problem. Mostly the schooling had been terminated. The academic year is over or is coming to the end shortly. In some situations, the occupants have forcibly extended the academic year in order to impose their curricula and try to pour poison into the hearts and minds of the Ukrainian children. And that is perilous. And that is an act of an educational genocide defined by the international law. Tell us about the Ukrainian educators. Are the Russian invaders forcing them to work with the children, or are they bringing in the Russian teachers? That differs. We can proudly state that most Ukrainian educators have resisted the Russian urges and threats and have stayed faithful to Ukraine and haven't sided with the Russians and are not teaching following the Russian curricula. There have been cases when the teachers have collaborated with the enemy, whether for their lack of caution or for financial gains as they made promises, or when the people are support of the Russian world and have been indoctrinated, then perhaps they side with the Russians. But most, the vast majority, haven't, and we are most grateful to them. Thank you, all the educators, for staying true to Ukraine and staying true to their professional duty. We have questions in the audience. I'm Adi Shevchenko, Mediacentru Ukraine. If I could ask you about the situation with the admission to Ukrainian universities and colleges, which is to happen soon. It's likely that many students will not be able to apply to universities because they're abroad or elsewhere. Some other universities have been ravaged and will not be able to open their doors to the Ukrainian students. How shall Ukraine tackle these challenges? You're perfectly right. We find ourselves in a predicament, and I would consider two separate tracks that are interlinked, yet they're different. Usually, this external independent testing was part of the graduation campaign for the school leavers, and it was part of the admission campaign. It was one of the requirements of the universities. This year, we have banned the graduation tests for the 9th-year-old and the 11th-year-old school children, and children will take a simplified graduation test, which is called the multidisciplinary test. And that will help us administer the test and also be able to use it as a grounds for fair, equitable, and equal access to higher education. For the children in occupation, we cannot organize the testing session even in theory. We cannot administer the national multidisciplinary test, so those wanting to take it will have to seek ways to go to the Ukraine controlled territory. The national multidisciplinary test will be administered at the testing centers both Ukraine and abroad. Many countries have supported us in this initiative and are organizing testing centers for the Ukrainian school leavers. And we will need to have it done. And the preparations are being made. Today, we have the 3rd of June, and by the 7th of June, the school leavers have to go to the office and confirm their willingness to take the national multidisciplinary test. Then we will analyze the applications for the test and the testing centers that they can be offered. And then in late June, starting the 25th of June until the 7th of July, the school leavers will have to finally make up their mind which testing center they will able to arrive at in order to take the multidisciplinary test. So this is the next upcoming step. As for the admission to the university, the criteria will be very different for apparent reasons. Until the 31st of May, the universities had to approve their admission regulations and make them public on their website. So I would urge all the school leavers and the university applicants to go to the websites of the universities that they seek to join and check the procedure. As for the number of school leavers and admission to the higher education facilities, the universities and colleges, it's hard for us to make any estimates. At this point, the number of school leavers can be smaller, as many children are now staying abroad, but we can clearly say that many children who have gone abroad are determined to apply to the Ukrainian universities. And to make that happen, will be taking the national multidisciplinary test. As of early week, there were 15,000 such Ukrainian students abroad. You can check the recent numbers at the website of the Ministry of Education and at the Educational Center for the Assessment of the Quality of Education. The thing is that many school leavers will not be applying for the budget paid majors but contracted studies, and they have a separate procedure. They won't all accept the multidisciplinary test. Some specialties will admit students based on the application, motivational essays, and an interview. I urge the people to check that at the relevant website of the universities. Can I ask you a broader question? How can Ukraine preserve the quality of education in the context of this brutal invasion? The quality of the Ukrainian education hinges on the Ukrainian army performance. The quicker we shall restore the territorial sovereignty of Ukraine, the faster we can liberate the area, repulse the invaders, and gain control over the territories and of the system of education. Indeed, the question you have posed is very broad, and the answer would take 3 or 4 hours. But in a nutshell, the challenges are vast. A lot is being done, still more needs to be done. But the key priority for us now, before the onset of the academic year, is to receive a clear understanding of the educational losses the Ukrainian students, school students, and university students have sustained because of the pandemic and the armed aggression of the Russian Federation. We know that we have lost out on education. They are significant, but we cannot specifically assess the losses sustained and what do we need to do to recuperate the losses. So the question of the educational assessment has always been on top of our agenda. We have always prioritized the assessment of the quality of education. So we need to make the assessment to know what we need to restore. And we don't have the clarity yet. We need to make sure we gain it. So now the schools, the universities in Ukraine have to start thinking, how do they do it at their institutional level? How do they designate the educational losses and the way to make up for them? And this is something that we should be addressing urgently. Thank you, Serhii. We had the Education Ombudsman of Ukraine, Serhii Horbachov, with us now. Please follow our announcements. The next meeting is coming up at 12:30. Please stay